I don't think anyone expects that it's going to be your kid, that your kid's going to be the one who gets hooked on drugs.
The night I got shot, I had been drinking and smoking crack.
Eric was never really an easy child. Took him to a lot of different doctors when he was growing up, but he has always been this dynamic, charismatic kid that everyone loves.
It all starts with, alcohol and marijuana.
He's funny. He's outgoing. He never met a stranger. Eric sees no colors. He enjoys all people. And he has no fear.
I was down to my last $6. I was living in a halfway house, and we were out of money. We had $6 pooled together, and one of my roommates suggested that we go try and rip off a drug dealer in a city here in Florida. And it didn't go as planned, and he shot my car 8 times with a 9mm handgun, and I got shot in the back. The bullet still lodged a ½ inch from my spinal cord. I was rushed to the emergency room. It was definitely a defining moment in my life.
You wonder, well, how did it get out of control so fast? The first time Eric got drunk was at a family wedding.
The first time I got drunk was at my cousin's wedding, and I remember I loved the feeling.
Wedding's going on, he went around the room, played the game with his cousins, give me a sip of your drink, give me a sip of your drink. Before you know it, he's in the bathroom throwing up, his grandmother's handing him a wash rag, and everyone's just kind of laughs. So, well, he won't do that again.
I loved it so much, and I remember right out of the gate, I got way too drunk, and I acted really stupid, and I threw up all night, and I woke up the next morning, and I remember everybody telling me, "Oh, I bet you learned a lesson. Oh, I bet you're not going to drink so much again." And I agreed with them, and in the back of my mind, I was like, "You're crazy. I'm going to do this the next opportunity I get." And I remember drinking a few days after that with some friends from school, and soon after that, I started smoking marijuana on a regular basis, and that was just a whole nother level for me, right out of the gate with smoking weed.
It affected him very differently. He knew that life had changed for him, and it progressed very quickly. All of the usual things didn't work, and they usually don't work if your child is an addict, if they're wired that way. You can take away the car keys, you can ground them, you can do any number of things, you can make threats, you can, it just runs the gamut. But if an addict is wired to be an addict and they're driven by that next high, it's hard to stop. It's really hard to stop. My best advice I can give other parents is I'm a big proponent of drug testing. I don't think they have a right to privacy. I am really against underage drinking. Their brains are developing. It can grab them at such a young age and run away with your child. I think educate yourself. Every parent needs to know, especially if this has come into your home, get educated. You've got to learn. If you don't arm yourself with addiction, addiction will swallow you whole.
Be aware of who your kids are hanging out with, where they're going. Check up on their story. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions, and question everything they say. And it's not because you don't trust them, but it's just because you know how it can start, and you're knowledgeable, and you're looking for those signs that can indicate that a young person is maybe starting to experiment with drugs, and you could stop it dead in its tracks before it starts.
We had a pretty average home. My sons went to private parochial school, had the advantages of playing sports, doing the regular supportive role of their parents, both their parents. We had a pretty average home. All the things you hear to keep your kids off drugs. Don't have a lot of alcohol in your house. I didn't. Usually during the week, or if there was just not alcohol in the house. If I was having people over or something like that, I'm not saying there was all abstinence in the house, but it wasn't kept in the house. You're supposed to do that. Have dinner every night with your kids. That was very common. We sat down, ate dinner together as a family. Spend time with your children. All of those things that they tell you will keep your kid off drugs. They're wonderful things, but there's no guarantee. The monster can show up at your house and take your kid away. It progressed so rapidly from beer to smoking pot. The school called me one time and said, "We think your child is smoking pot," so I had him drug tested. Passed just fine, so I'm thinking they must not know what they're talking about. Plus, you're always thinking in the back of your mind, "Oh, kids are going to experiment, you know? Kids will be kids, boys will be boys." But it can happen so very quickly, and you're in for the fight of your life if that happens.
I was high before school. I was smoking during lunch. I was smoking weed between classes. You know, if I was awake, I was high in high school just perpetually. And, you know, I remember it escalated from that. You know, people would take Loratabs or Xanax from their parents' medicine cabinets, and I would eat those. And, you know, we used to drink Robitussin cough syrup. You know, we'd drink a bottle or two of that. It had DXM in it, and, you know, we would trip off that. It would have hallucinogen effects. And, you know, I remember, you know, the first stimulants I was introduced to was Ritalin and Adderall, you know, crushing that up and snorting it. And
I took Eric to rehab the first time when he was 17 years old. That was an ordeal. I got support and help from a group in Edmond called Parents Helping Parents. They are just a group of wonderful people. And the leader of that group gave me advice. I thought, he's 17 years old, what can I do? Isn't he of age where I can't, you know, make him do something? And this very kind man said to me, "What do you think's going to happen? Do you think they're going to arrest you? Put him in the car and take him." So that's what I did, with the help of my family. I've always had a wonderful, supportive family, big family, and lots of help for Eric. He's well loved.
people told me, well, you know, if you like Adderall and you like Ritalin, then you're going to like cocaine. And I started doing cocaine, and, you know, I remember one of my friends moved to a bad area of town, and we tried to get some cocaine one night, and he brought back the cocaine, and it wasn't powdered cocaine, it was crack. And, you know, we smoked it, and, you know, after that it was just game over. You know, I remember a few weeks later I was stealing from my family, from my friends, anything I could get my hands on to get that high. I signed the title away to one of my vehicles. I would do whatever it takes to get high, and that turned to more stimulant abuse, crystal meth, and that's when I started using drugs intravenously, and I became real paranoid off the stimulants. You know, as soon as me and my friends found out where to get heroin, we all started doing it, and once you shoot heroin, it's all I could think about. I just obsessed on it, and to this day, if I think about drugs and I think about using, it's that.
I think he took something from every stay in recovery or every stay in treatment.
It's not so much the fear of consequences from the law or consequences from your parents. It's that you have a good thing going and you don't want to ruin it.
Family's important to him. He doesn't take drugs to hurt me. He does it because he's an addict.
If you're on a substance so much, eventually it just becomes normal to you. I would sit down and eat dinner, and I would go to work an 8-hour shift. I would interact with customers. I would live a normal life, just shooting heroin.
I realized that he and I needed distance, and we needed some sort of separation. So I put him in the car, and he is literally detoxing from heroin in the car. And I know we have 3 days ahead of us.
So I wanted to be anywhere but there. I wanted to feel anything other than the way I was feeling, and all I could think about was getting high, and I didn't care.
Driving, driving, and driving.
I didn't care how, but I just needed to feel something different. I wanted to crawl out of my skin.
Unbelievable. He's sweating, he's gagging, he's sick. He stops at a convenience store and gets a beer. I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm driving down the road. He's got an open container. Now I had him pour it in a Sonic cup, but all I can think is, I just have to get him there.
I remember at one point we stopped in Memphis to stop and use the restroom or something, and we stopped in a bad part of town, and I just immediately thought about just grabbing some money and running off, you know, and trying to cop dope, or, you know, buying some liquor and just chugging some alcohol.
I just have to get him to Florida. Every time I stop the car, I'm a little bit afraid maybe he'll run.
But, you know, something told me that wasn't the right thing to do, and, you know, I stuck it out, but, you know, I definitely was thinking about using the entire time, and, you know, every time the car stopped, I analyzed what my options were.
We have a horrible experience in Memphis. We get off on a tragic street, and there's literally, it looks like a movie scene. There's a barrel and fires coming out of the barrel, and people are standing around it, and they're warming their hands, and they're smoking something. I mean, and right out in the open, and I just panicked. I was just driving, and Eric launches into this strange voice, and he's trying to get me to stop the car, and he's telling me he can score, and I'm like, this is not happening. This is so surreal. He truly believed for a moment that I would do that.
I can't really tell you what kept me in that car, but something inside me, be it God or something, you know, just I knew deep down that I was going to a good place.
And he kind of came to his senses, and he was like, oh my gosh, Mom, did you hear me? You know, and that was one of the first times after about 8 hours of driving or 10 hours of driving where he was actually, you know, spoke to me in a civil tone. But all I knew is I just had to keep going. I didn't even really know where I was going. I didn't know that much about Florida. I didn't know much about this home. It was recommended to me by a very kind-hearted woman who had sent her son there. You do that in addiction. Parents help parents, parents network. That seems to be where you get the best solution. Parents know about treatment centers. Parents know how to work the systems. Parents know about insurance and help you figure out ways to pay for all of this. So this woman had helped me, and I was just driven. All I could think about was, I've got to get there.
I would say you didn't do anything right or wrong. You know, I think the whole family was in denial. You know, nobody wants to admit that addiction is happening to them. Nobody wants to admit that their family, you know, it's a very taboo, stigmatized issue, and, you know, you want to just sweep it under the rug, and everybody wants their kids to be normal, and, you know, nobody wants their kid to be an addict, so.
You don't ever know. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? But you know it's the next thing to do. And with addiction, sometimes you just have to keep trying, and you try the next thing. Tough love always comes into play. You know, people would tell me, Kelly, you've got to stop supporting him. You're enabling him. But you tell me, as a mom, that's the hardest thing in the world to understand. I'm a mom. How do I give up?
Tough love is good in theory, but it's really difficult to actually do when it comes time to do it. I think that, you know, it's hard as a parent to kick your kid out whenever you know that he or she is going to be homeless and actually on the streets, and, you know, you want to believe your kid. So, you know, I think that it's a fine line between tough love and enabling, and I think that people make mistakes every day with that, and I think that mistakes are okay to be made, and I think that, you know, you call it like you see it, and you know, you just roll with the punches as it goes along, and you try to keep to your bottom line, and if not, you create a new one.
I've always told Eric, if you're fighting, I'm fighting. And that's kind of the motto that we've adopted. So when he's staying on track, working hard, I'm right there with him. I'm right beside him. And we'll keep fighting. And every day's a new day. That's what I always used to tell him. Any given day, Eric, you can turn this around.
And, you know, you just try your best. But, you know, I think tough love, you know, there's definitely a lot of aspects of that ring true. And I think that, you know, ideally, tough love is great. I think that it's a lot more difficult than somebody who hasn't gone through it to say, well, you need to just practice tough love. Well, you know, somebody needs to understand how hard that is.
Relapse can sometimes be a part of recovery. It doesn't have to be, but sometimes it is. And that's when it kind of kicks you in the stomach, and you take a deep breath and you realize that I don't keep my son sober. I can't do that. But I can love him, and I can fight with him, and that's what it's all about. My son has a chemical dependency problem, and I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him for the struggle. I'm proud of him for the fight. And I'm proud of who he has become. But we don't talk about it in our society. You know, there was a time we didn't talk about breast cancer. We didn't talk about abortion. There were times when, you know, many years ago, they used to sterilize people who had epilepsy. Hopefully someday addiction will change. Hopefully someday it won't be a group of people that we basically say to them, help each other, work this out amongst yourselves, because that's where the help is now. And there is wonderful help in AA and NA and Al-Anon. They're all great programs. But name me another disease where we say, you guys figure it out.
You lose that grip on reality, and you start to slip eventually. Nobody can maintain control forever, and you know, some addicts are at a higher level of functionality than other addicts, and you know, I know that, you know, I can hold it together for a little while, but you know, there becomes a point where, you know, there's no holding it together.
We don't have the money for research. We don't, it's not a high priority. If you ask someone, you know, what addiction is, they're going to tell you that, they're going to describe it to you as the bum on the corner. They're not going to describe it to you as the trial lawyer or the doctor or the CEO of a company. That's not what they're going to think of, but that's who it impacts.
I was at Sunset House, and I was there for a year. And it's a 6-month program, so I stayed there a little longer than required, but I wanted to do that, and I needed to do that at that point in my life, and you know, I owe a lot of credit to them. That place saved my life, and I would recommend that place for anybody needing help, you know, even if you live in Oklahoma.
And for my son, it happened so quickly that it interrupted his life. He's 25 now. He's still living in Florida. He's doing well.
My life would be completely different had I not moved down to Florida and, you know, and gotten my life together. I'm not saying that geographical changes will work for everyone, and, you know, the big book talks about how that's not necessarily the answer. But, you know, sometimes you need to start fresh, and I know that, you know, I can't have one foot in and one foot out. I'm either full-on using or I'm full-on sober. I don't do anything halfway.
But every day is a struggle for him. Every day he has to get up and make that decision to stay sober. Parents have to somehow, or maybe it's not just parents, maybe it's we as a society, have to bring addiction out to the forefront. I mean, the very essence of the name Alcoholics Anonymous has shame in it. Why does this have to be anonymous? Why is it not treated as a disease? Why can our society not talk about it? I wasn't comfortable with that. I just didn't really accept that. That's why I wanted to tell my story. I think it's important. I would like to see other people stand up for addiction. I would like other people to send me their video clips and tell me their story and stand up for addiction. I think it's time that we as a society try to make a difference.